Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Sir Hunt on X. I do apologize for the technical difficulties. My microphone wasn't set up correctly, so I take the responsibility for it. But this is the 6th of October of the calendar year 2025, and I was hoping everyone had themselves a wonderful day and 3-day weekend. Interesting circumstances a minute ago, but now I'm ready to roll and ready to go. Let's go get right down to it. As I said before, it's about what took place yesterday in Week 5, all the overreactions, previewing tonight's game, and a wild circumstance that took place in the '88 Olympics. I'll touch on all of those here in a minute. As I started out, it was the Week 5 game in London between Minnesota and Cleveland. Not a bad performance by Dylan Gabriel. Not necessarily good, but it wasn't bad either. I mean, he wasn't the reason why they lost the game. That's what you want when you start a rookie quarterback. That's what it basically comes down to. And so that's what you got out of this. But the story at the end was we needed a Cleveland defense to make the stop, who's been formidable all year long. They couldn't get it done, and that's why the Cleveland Browns lost that particular game to Minnesota, who needed to win after laying an egg against the Pittsburgh Steelers the week before when they were in Ireland. So this concluded their 2-game trip across the Atlantic in Ireland and England. They split, losing to Pittsburgh and beating Cleveland. Of course, coming after they just destroyed Cincinnati. So they clipped 3/4 of the AFC North over there. They're coming back, still in the middle of the NFC North playoff hunt. Cleveland's 1-4 as they come home from Ireland, get ready for a big AFC North showdown with Pittsburgh. But it was a solid game, good win for Minnesota. We can get an overseas win like that. It does a lot for your confidence. So that takes care of the Minnesota, the game overseas. Now to the rest of the Sunday tilt. Some of you newbies are new to this. I go through the NFL schedule game by game, make 1 or 2 takes about it, just move on and talk about some of the things that took place, the overreactions. So we'll start it right here. It was the Saints over the Falcons. It was the biggest win over. This will be the first win over for the New Orleans Saints. When you turn the ball over as often as the Giants did, you're begging for an L. Luckily for somewhat fortunate for them, the Saints offered nothing. But the real tipping point was the red zone fumble by Cam Skedabo that was picked up for a touchdown, and Rashid Shaheed, big game, 114 yards, including the 87-yard touchdown that basically burned it. The Giants, you turn the ball over 5 times, you're losing the game regardless, and that's essentially what happened yesterday. They're turning the ball over 5 times. They turned the ball over in 5 straight possessions, if I'm correct. 4 interceptions and a fumble. You're essentially begging for an L at that point. Saints on the board with their first win. Giants are going to be kicking themselves about this one. But it's going to be a long season anyways because it's starting the Jackson Dart era. But the Saints got to win at their home field. Probably the only one they're going to get for a while. After blowing the lead against Miami, a lot of futures over here. It was, of course, Carolina beating Miami. You blow a lead to the Carolina Panthers, there's going to be people in the hot seat. And you saw the look on Mike McDaniel's face as he was headed to the locker room after that loss, because he knows his 5 minutes of fame are about coming to an end. And at this story here, this one was the defense couldn't stop Rico Dowdle, and the Miami's offense just had the game under control, couldn't add on to it. Came out to the 17-0 lead early in the second quarter, only scored 7 points the rest of the way. Just inexcusable, especially against a Carolina team who just the week before just had it handed them by the New England Patriots. And so the future in Miami, not all great when it comes to, we talk about Mike McDaniel, Tua Tagovailoa, and that team over there. Of course, losing Tyreek Hill for the season didn't help, but still, you shouldn't have blown that kind of a lead. And because of it, the Miami Dolphins season is essentially a wrap. And it's going to be jobs lost more than likely. course, it was announced that after the season is over, they're going to release Tyreek Hill, and more likely Mike McDaniel is going to join him out that door. I said there's some coaches that might be better served to stay as coordinators as opposed to transfer to the coaching position. Mike McDaniel might be the perfect case of this. We saw Robert Saleh when he was the coach of the Jets, going back to the D coordinator in San Francisco. Look at the defense in San Francisco being under him. Same thing might be here with Mike McDaniel. He'll be back as a coordinator, and I think he'd be more suited for that. And someone's going to get a heck of a play caller because you can see a lot of things. Not a great coach, but as an O coordinator, the guy was solid, and I think he'll find a good spot as an O coordinator. But as a head coach, Mike McDaniel's time is pretty much done. And this one, no surprise here. The Colts just demolishing the Raiders. Daniel Jones continues his assurgence to one of the better quarterbacks in the league after the debacle with the Giants. Jonathan Taylor with 3 touchdown runs, a blocked punt by Segun Obi, and the Raiders. They're just the Raiders. Basically, ever since they signed Geno Smith, it's been egg on their face. So he's basically a stopgap quarterback till they find someone. I think after this season, he's more likely going to be served as a backup or an emergency role moving forward because this guy is no longer starting material. I mean, the guy, his 5 minutes of fame was up in Seattle, but because Pete Carroll was here in Las Vegas, where Geno Smith played for in Seattle, that's why he's lucky to land on his feet. His time is basically up as a starting quarterback. The Raiders season is basically toast. Show you the proof of it. They released Jermaine Pratt. Likely he's going back to Indy to play under his old defensive coordinator, Lou Anarumo. Of course, those two were there in Cincinnati. But the Colts, big win. They continue their march. I mean, a lot of people are talking about the Colts' quality of wins. In the NFL, you play who's in front of you. You beat them, great. If you don't beat them, you're going to get everything thrown in your face. So you have to give that to the Colts right now. They're handling business. And the Cowboys demolished the Jets. I said all along this was going to be a wipeout. It was. Game wasn't as close as the score indicated. Dallas did everything and anything they wanted to. The Jets offered nothing. I mean, basically the Jets defense, we had a defensive mind like Aaron Glenn. You thought that they were going to be better, but they're not. And it showed on this day. Dak Prescott did anything and everything he wanted to. So too did George Pickens. And the Dallas Cowboys go marching on. The Jets, pretty much, they may be flirting with a winless season. I mean, that's the only way I can sum up the Jets. I mean, they signed Justin Fields, that backfired. And now Aaron Glenn and the defense, which is supposed to be somewhat of their calling card, has laid eggs all week long. Not all week, but all season long. And I expect that to continue. And the game of the early slate was in Philadelphia with the Broncos and beating the Eagles. Thought this one would be close. Thought the Eagles would make more plays. But kudos to the Broncos. Maybe the telling moment was going for 2 when they were down 1. Instead of going for the tie, they went for the go-ahead score, and they did just that. And basically, what a fourth quarter for Bo Nix. 9 for 10, 127 yards to lead for the upset win. Broncos might have just righted the ship a little bit. Schedule gets a little easier, so I think it's like week 9 or week 10. They have that big AFC West tilt against Kansas City. But before then, they have an easier part of their schedule where they should be able to rack up a few wins and get back in the playoff hunt. But for Philadelphia, A.J. Brown just showed his colors yesterday. Everybody, he can sing all the right things about he's not frustrated. He's not frustrated. Now it showed yesterday on the sideline. Still here with this one on their offense. Their offensive struggles continue. 2 for 11 on third down. Basically, they didn't get Barkley the ball enough after they had the game had the lead, and that's why you beg for a loss. You just signed Saquon Barkley for a guy who ran for 2,000 yards and not give him the ball. Now they dare Jalen Hurts to beat him. I mean, great. He's done that throughout his career so far. Didn't yesterday, but I said all along when it comes to this Philadelphia offense is pick your poisons. Are you going to let Saquon Barkley? You're going to dare Saquon Barkley to beat you, or are you going to dare Jalen Hurts to beat you? They dared the Denver defense dared Jalen Hurts to beat him, and he didn't. So the Broncos get the big road win. Eagles fans, you can complain about the refs all you want. Put it on the fact your offense was 2 for 11 on third down which allowed Denver to stay in the game. They've been free fall. Basically, all your games are one possession games. You played with fire all season long, and it finally caught up to you. Moving forward, you're probably going to need to have a bit of a different change of philosophy and try to get something done. Granted, you're 4-1 right now, and you're still going to win that division, but you guys have bigger issues moving forward and bigger goals. And to get those bigger goals, you need to play better than what you have so far, despite your record. And Denver, they're back in the mix. I expect them to get a few wins before the big Sunday night tilt in about some point next month against Kansas City. And the defense is basically doing all the heavy lifting. What a heck of a coached game by Sean Payton, especially when he went for two instead of going for the tie late in the game. When he went for the two and then kicked the game, pretty much a game-clinching field goal in the end, that's all you need to know. Solid road win for the Broncos. Now, this next game I'm going to talk about had everything and then some, the good, the bad, and the comedy. This was the Titans and the Cardinals. The Cardinals had a 15-point lead, and they blew it. How was it blown? Well, let's start with what really happened with this one. The big one, of course, Amari DeMarcado, the apparent touchdown. When you fumble, does it wind up looking like Leon Lett way back when for the Dallas Cowboys? Poses the ball out, fumbles the ball just before it crosses the goal line. So there's reason number one, you lost a game. Reason number two, let's talk about Darian Taylor Demerson. He had the interception, fumbled it, and it bounced all over the place for the fall, fumbled in the end zone, and it was recovered by Tennessee for the touchdown. Not to mention, you had a Kyler Murray who took a snap directly in his face and let the game, have everyone joking whether he was concussed from the snap. To topple all of that, the three losses of Arizona this season, 3 straight losses by a game-winning field goal with time expiring as the games respectively end. First time in NFL history that's happened. It's a mess right now in Arizona. By the way, Marvin Harrison, the only thing good that came out of it was Marvin Harrison Jr. decided to show up in the NFL, finally made a play for once. But the Cardinals are a mess. And the way they lost this game, that's basically the epitome of what's happened so far. Basically, one of your 2 wins this season was against the New Orleans Saints. There's nothing to write home about. It should be the 2 wins against the Saints and the Panthers. They're not nothing home to write about. You haven't looked good in either of those 2 games. I mean, you almost blew the game against Carolina. You're just lucky an onside kick bounced your way. That's how bad it's been so far for Arizona. Otherwise, they'd be staring at 0-5. But for Tennessee, you're not out of the woods. It's likely still going to have a Brian Callahan terminated at some point soon. But Cam Ward showed why he was the number 1 overall pick. Almost 200 yards in the fourth quarter. In the midst of all the comedy that was taking place in this particular game, especially in the final 5 minutes. But it's not looking good right now for Arizona. You guys better find a way to right the ship, or it's not going to be pretty moving forward. How the heck do you blow a game like that? It's not the fact Arizona had a 15-point lead. They had a 15-point lead against a team with the worst record in the NFL and find a way to blow it by just being full of themselves and having all kinds of comedy and errors all over the place. Really, the real game of the day took place in the Northwest. We talk about Tampa Bay over Seattle. Both quarterbacks played pretty darn well, Sam Darnold and Baker Mayfield. The exception, of course, was the late game interception by Sam Darnold, which turned out to be the game-winning field goal for Tampa Bay. But once again, Tampa Bay finding ways to win when it matters most. And now might be time to start having a serious conversation about MVP for Baker Mayfield. As I said last week, he's ascended to a top 10 quarterback in the NFL after what happened in Cleveland and have it bounced around. Ever since Tampa Bay picked him up, he's had a renaissance. He's taken off. He got a nice contract in this season. He's just taking his game to a whole new level, adding a clutch gene to what he's done over there in Tampa Bay. And we talk about the connection he always has with Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. Of course, Evans is out for the hamstring pull. Now he has that same connection with the rookie Emeka Egbuka, who was just wild yesterday by himself. And what a heck of a combo Mayfield and Egbuka has become. I mean, Egbuka's eventually replaced Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, one of those two. And when you have a quarterback like Baker Mayfield, who sees the field well and knows how to communicate with his receivers and knows how to connect, you're going to have success. And that's why Baker Mayfield has had success since he went to Tampa Bay. And that's why right now, Emeka Egbuka is a front runner for the Rookie of the Year and by a significant margin. And it is a good job with Baker Mayfield getting him going early. Ever since he stepped onto the field, being Egbuka, he's taken off, and him and Mayfield have been a hand-in-glove fit in a connection down there in Tampa Bay. And Baker Mayfield made atone for that red zone interception he threw against Philly last week with a very darn good performance. He's now in the MVP conversation and should be. As long as Tampa Bay keeps winning, which they more than likely will. And a bit of a stunner, maybe not in terms of who won, but how was what done. It was Washington over the Chargers. Granted, the Chargers were banged up, and Justin Herbert got pressured and beat up virtually the entire game. But no one, I couldn't foresee we lose Terry McLaurin and Noah Brown, how Jaden Daniels was going to get the job done. But kudos to him. He got the job done. And, of course, Ja'Cory Crosby-Merritt just absolutely went wild with 150 yards himself. Those are your fantasy owners, kudos. And basically, the defense just put the clamps on Justin Herbert. 2 sacks for Von Miller. Still strong, albeit in a part-time role. This may be the game that rides the ship for Washington, especially on defense, which their defense hasn't been all that great so far this season. Maybe they use this game to get something going here because they've been non-existent so far. Jaden Daniels, granted, he missed the last 2 games with the knee problem, looked healthy coming back this week. And if he's healthy, they're going to be back in the hunt, especially in the NFC West. The Sunday night tilt, how can you not be impressed with Drake May? This might be his coming out party, what took place last night, especially the morning where he rolled right that found Stephon Diggs for the big play that set up the game-winning field goal with 15 seconds left. And the Patriots got the win. Josh Allen basically was a turnover machine for the longest time. Found a way to get off of it. It's been a solid taking care of the ball for the last couple of years under Joe Brady, their offensive coordinator. But it was this time that the turnover battle, which Buffalo's won 26 straight times, they lost it because Allen had two of them himself. Keon Coleman had a fumble. And the Patriots capitalized with 10 points off the turnovers. Buffalo's defense had no answers for Ramondre Stevenson, who had 2 rushing touchdowns himself. And that in the fourth quarter, Drake May going 6 for 6. Might be his coming out party where he's finally introduced as a top quarterback in the NFL. And this might be the moment New England's waited for quite a while to find themselves relevant again. They have a few easy so-called gimme games coming up. Now, granted, it's any given Sunday, but they were pegged to be a bubble team for a playoff spot. They can win these next few games. They'll be in the mix for an actual playoff spot. New England has played pretty well the last few weeks, aside of the game at home against Pittsburgh where the offense just laid an egg, for all things considered. But they're rolling. Drake May might have had his breakout game where he showed the world why he's going to be a pretty darn good quarterback moving forward. And it was a big win for the New England Patriots. First time they won in Buffalo since Tom Brady was their quarterback. That was saying a whole lot. And the next 2 games I'm going to divulge into because we have some problems all over the place. Let's start with the beatdown that took place in Baltimore yesterday between the Texans and the Ravens. We know the story what happened with Baltimore. Basically, they have over $170 million in players sidelined. But still, against a Houston team who couldn't score on a bunch of statues, that defense allowed Houston to score 44 points. And the defense is a problem, and Zach Orr, the defensive coordinator, has to be on the hot seat. I mean, everybody's hot as John Harbaugh. Maybe Orr's might be hotter when considered he took over for Mike McDonald, excuse me. I remember how good that defense was in 23 under McDonald before he went to take the head coaching job in Seattle. And when you talk about that defense, they can't stop anybody. I mean, it was the same way for the most part last season until they figured it out. But this year, now with Matabike out for the year, and injuries to guys like Marlon Humphrey, Kyle Hamilton, and Roquan Smith, among others. And even when they were healthy, they weren't stopping anyone. Where does this Baltimore team go, especially on the defensive side? I mean, they basically came in and was just basically listless against a Houston team who basically just mailed it in once the season started. And maybe this could have been a game they could have found a way to buck up and win, but didn't. And Baltimore, they're going to have the Rams next week. Then they're going to have a bye. We'll see what happens after the bye. Now, the schedule does get a little lighter. I mean, it's any given Sunday. But even then, you're picking up your bad habits already. And if you don't fix those bad habits at the bye, it's going to have a snowball effect. They're still pegged as the Vegas favorite to win the AFC North for now, because the jury's still out on Pittsburgh. But there's boatloads of work to do, and boatloads. Remember, a lot of people had this team at least in the AFC title game against Kansas City this season, at least betting-wise. They're fixing to not even make the playoffs if all this continues. We'll find out what they're made of Sunday against the Rams this coming week. We'll see who plays and doesn't play. That's going to be one of the bigger issues. But for Houston, that might have been the win that more salvaged their season a little bit. Their biggest luck out is they're playing the AFC South. And even though they lost once already to Jacksonville, they haven't played their division yet. So they're going to be they might be just fine eventually. This was one of their get-right games which they needed. We'll see where that goes. But for Houston, one thing still, they still need to find a way to protect C.J. Stroud. That's been the problem with this team for the last year and a half. Granted, they lucked out because Baltimore's defense brought nothing to the table. We'll see moving forward with Houston. But they did get a get-right game, which is what they needed moving forward. And now I'm going to touch on the problems that's taking on place over here in Cincinnati. And we have a lot, to say we have a lot of problems is an understatement. I mean, more than what's going on in Baltimore. Because Baltimore's problem is key guys are out. Baltimore's problem is key guys are out. Granted, their schemes are not all that great either, but key guys are out. For the Cincinnati Bengals, the problem runs deeper. And right now, you guys have crashed and burned worse than Enron. And fast and bad. Let's start with this. Jake Browning was awful. I mean, he was. I mean, let's get out of the way. He supposedly basically held on to his job probably for another week moving forward, just for the time being, because of garbage points and garbage plays. But once again, we have another conversation of the Bengals fan base and the Cincinnati media going at it again with the ticket sales and what is going on with that. But once again, you got the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media are using ticket sales to Detroit fans as a scapegoat and as a cloud to the real problems that's been going on for the last 3 years, because you left key needs on the roster unattended and not even to bother to be looked at. That's the issue. Because you needed a real offensive line for the last several years. You didn't want to get it. You've had a defense that's been a laughingstock the last couple of years. You didn't want it to be looked at. Your primary focus, again, was Burrow, Chase, and Higgins paid top dollar, while you ignored those needs insanely and grotesquely. And this is what's happened as a result. And because this is what has happened, this is what you can expect moving forward. And everybody here wants the Bengals to look into a quarterback position to find someone that could try and find a way to salvage the season. Who are you going to get? I mean, you can say Jameis Winston, but I remind you how awful Jameis Winston was his final year as a full-time starter for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers when he threw 30 interceptions. That's why he's hardly started ever since. Everybody wants to talk about Russell Wilson. Ask Steeler fans about how that experiment turned out for them. It's going to be worse for you. Problem is not who the quarterback is going to be. Problem is the fact you have a Bengals fan base and a Cincinnati media who once again neglected to see the big picture. And the big picture was this roster had holes all over the place since losing Super Bowl 56 to the Rams. And they were never legitimately addressed. And there was no call-outs to have that roster legitimately addressed. That's been the problem for the last 4 years. And it's reared its ugly head the last 3 weeks. We talk about at Minnesota, at Denver, and yesterday against the Detroit Lions. Granted, I mean, I don't think you're going to beat the Detroit Lions anyways because this Lions team was a juggernaut and it showed. Score doesn't show it much. But when you have these kind of glaring holes and you don't want to address them, you can expect this result to be happen week in, week out, moving forward. Doesn't matter who your quarterback is. You have an offensive line who can't protect a defense of 11 statues right now, because that defense of 11 statues would find a way to get to whoever's playing quarterback. I mean, that's what happened to Joe Burrow week 2, and that's what happened to Joe Burrow really 3 times in his NFL career already. And that's what happened basically the previous 2 weeks against Minnesota and Denver, where the defense just found a way to get to Jake Browning. Now, they got to Jake Browning, but there were sacks nullified by defensive penalty. But that's another problem, and that's something Bengals fans and Cincinnati media want to exempt themselves from simply because they don't know how to read the details very well. I warned everyone for the last 4 years this was going to come. Nobody wanted to listen because you have sorts of that sick-minded tendency day in and day out to have the actions the way you guys do. And as a result, what happened yesterday what happened. And it's more is going to be coming. Because this Sunday, you're going to be playing against a Green Bay team who's going to be ticked off, coming off a bye after laying an egg in Dallas. And you know the defense is going to lick their chops and going to cook, especially Micah Parsons, who's going to live in that backfield at this rate. So you might as well just take it. I mean, you guys are more upset with people selling tickets to the Lions fan base. That's the least of your problems. That's the problem with the Bengals fans and the Cincinnati media, and that's why their stocks crash faster than Enron. Why? Because they would rather focus on the non-issues than look at the real issues. And when you neglect the real issues, the results aren't going to be very good. And that's what happened the last 3 weeks. And basically, it was trending toward this point over the last 4 years since the Super Bowl 56 loss. They wanted Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, and I should now add Trey Hendrickson, pay the top dollar. They got it. And now they have to live with the results. They have to live with the consequences. You reap what you sow. You made the bid. Now keep your mouth quiet and go lie in it, because you're getting exactly what you deserve and exactly what you asked for. You guys, the stock fell worse than Enron, and not even Enron crashed and burned as bad as you guys did yesterday. And Enron crashed and burned quite bad. We all know what happened in the business sector with Enron 2.5 decades ago. You guys found a way to crash worse than Enron yesterday, and you guys are going to crash and burn even more and more telling at the rate you're going. Because at this point, if you want to jump off, you can go ahead and jump off. But don't jump off and come back on, because you're going to be the biggest coward walking God's green earth. And we have Bengals fans and Cincinnati media members that are filled with cowards. We talk about the media members like WLWT Channel 5, WCPO Channel 9, WKRC Channel 12, Fox 19, and of course the radio stations like 700 WLW, the coward Sarah Elise with the WEBN 102.7, and Kelsey Conway with the Cincinnati Enquirer, Cincinnati.com, who's also a coward. Is those people that are reason why everything's happened over the last 4 years. Don't blame ownership, because I told you for the longest time, ownership is not going to change their stripes. You can direct anything at them, they don't care. That's why I don't blame them for anything. Why? Because I've seen it for 3.5 decades. And anyone that points fingers at ownership at this point isn't getting anywhere, especially in Cincinnati. As I said, everyone's stock has crashed and burnt faster and worse than Enron did. You made your bid, shut your mouth and go lie in it. You're getting exactly what you deserve and what you asked for, because you refuse to call out the needs that were necessary to put together a winning product. You do not want to do that. You guys might have to live with the consequences. If you don't want to live with the consequences, that's fine. Jump off. But if you want to jump off, just disappear for good, because nobody wants to see you here ever again. I'll be talking about this more I'm going to save the rest of it for the end of the season because I might just have to go scorched earth a little bit. Somebody's going to probably put this clip on the Cincinnati radio stations and TV stations here. Go ahead. I don't care. I'll take a quote from Shannon Sharp. Whatever it is I said it. What are you going to do about it? Nothing. Case closed. Now I'm going to touch on some overreactions here real quick. We talk about this time of year, overreactions might have a bit more weight than, say, week 1 or 2. Well, let's start with this. Eagles are going to be fine, but they're going to get their offense rolling a little bit. They're going to get Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown the ball. Everybody's saying they're going to have a collapse like they did a couple years ago when they just fell off the map. Nah, they're going to be fine, but they got to get Saquon Barkley and A.J. Brown the ball. Aaron Glenn lasts as a head coach for the rest of the season? Probably. I mean, the Jets aren't going anywhere. You might as well forget about it. But what is firing a head coach going to do? Who are they going to get to replace him? No one's going to want that job. Maybe there's a better chance of the Bengals firing Zach Taylor or the Dolphins firing Mike McDaniel before the Jets fire Aaron Glenn. And I think the Zach Taylor firing is a bit of a stretch right now because he's a favorite of the ownership, despite how bad he is. Now, if they want to ride the season and fire him at the end, go ahead, because he's basically a lame duck coach right now. I mean, Raiders are going to have to bench Geno Smith. He's done. You probably what to say about that. And right now, in Emeka Okebeka, as I said, far and away the rookie of the year. He may break Puka Nakua's rookie record at the rate he's going. Especially when we talk about the MVP year so far, that MVP type year Baker Mayfield has. I mean, he's just been a hand-in-glove fit for Tampa Bay. He's eventually going to take the place of one of those two receivers, Mike Evans or Chris Godwin, within the next couple years and become their number one guy. He might actually break the rookie record. The guy's just a phenom right now down there in Tampa, just fitting in nicely. Luck just landed on the lap of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on that one. So that concludes my NFL pick recap and overreactions. More NFL to come, of course, throughout the week. Actually, one last thing I'll touch on real quick. Quick preview tonight. It is Kansas City and Jacksonville. I'm surprised a lot of people actually think Jacksonville has a chance in this one. I won't say they won't have a chance because their defense has been pretty good. Especially, I think they lead the league in forced turnovers. But you're going against Patrick Mahomes, and a Kansas City offense has found themselves over the last, say, 6 quarters, going back to after halftime of the Giants game. From that point forward, that offense is starting to cook, and I expect that to continue down in Jacksonville. It'll be a pretty good game. I think Kansas pulls away late. Who do you trust, Patrick Mahomes or Trevor Lawrence? The correct answer is Patrick Mahomes until somebody proves otherwise. Trevor Lawrence has been 50-50 this season, especially when you consider the 3 intentional interceptions he threw week 2 in Cincinnati. So that's where the line is drawn. And a quick side note before I head to boxing, shout out to FC Cincinnati, clinching that two seed for the MLS playoffs with a 1-0 win in New York over Red Bulls New York. Kevin Denke with the goal. I like their momentum going into this year's playoffs than I did last season, because last season, they finished basically with the same amount of points, but it was like something was missing. This year, I like their confidence heading into this particular MLS playoffs, and I think they're going to do better this year than they did last year. And last year, I thought that they were lacking in depth, and it showed in that playoff game because I was there. And the stamina was missing, and it showed as the game went on. I look forward to being down there in a few weeks once the playoff schedule is released. I'll be there. My show will be there. I look forward to that electric crowd at TQL Stadium. It's probably the best thing going on in Cincinnati sports right now since the Big Red Machine. And that's the electricity from the fans to the players and vice versa down there. It feeds off one another, and you always get electric performances. I'm looking forward to going to attending one of the playoff games here as the playoffs begin. By the way, the show will be live at TQL Stadium for that particular game. Now to the world of boxing, and lots to get to with this one. Actually, we'll go a little outside the box today, because it was 45 years ago today. A standout featherweight was introduced to the fight world. Got to win under odd circumstances. This was the standout featherweight Eusebio Pedroza taking on the upstart Rocky Lockridge at outside the Playboy Mansion Club in New Jersey. The story with this fight, it was Pedroza trying to get a unification fight with Salvador Sanchez, which was the big fight to make in that division at the time, facing the upstart Lockridge, who basically was 16-0, sort of unknown and virtually inexperienced against the all-time great Pedroza. But in this fight, Eusebio Pedroza got more than he could handle from the upstart Lockridge, and it looked like we were not going to. It was going to be the end of Pedroza's reign. We talk about the early rounds and the size that Pedroza has. He was a 5'9" featherweight, almost imposing. You don't thought of a 5'9" featherweight at that time, and that's what the Panamanian Eusebio Pedroza was. A 5'9" fighter, a physical specimen in that weight class with a long reach. And Rocky Lockridge did the smart thing, just get in his combinations, and get out. He built the early lead, although one of the rounds there could have gone either way. But as the fight was going on, the greatness of Pedroza started to show. When Pedroza started to make his adjustments, started getting a little lower instead of staying tall, which was allowing him to get hit by Rocky Lockridge. And he started to go to Pedroza's body. Granted, some of the shots were reportedly low, but even then, Pedroza started to find his mark. And as the rounds started to shift, especially when we got into rounds 9, 10, and 11, all the momentum started to fall for the favor of Eusebio Pedroza, especially the 8th round where he landed a big right hand that hurt him. And now, as he was starting to come on, he was making Rocky Lockridge miss and making him pay. And that was one of the trademarks of Eusebio Pedroza, one of the premier featherweights of this era, of all time, by the way. And from that point forward, he started to take over gradually. And as a result, Lockridge started to look sloppy. And from the 12th round and 13th round, he really started to take control. But as the end of the 13th round and the 14th and 15th round took place, both fighters started to get into a defensive shell. A lot of misses, a lot of not making opponents pay. Problem was, the last few rounds really got interesting because there was conflict who they thought won those rounds. And we head to the scorecards, and basically, a fight that had anticipation. A lot of the observers gave Lockridge the fight, but it was announced as a split decision win for Eusebio Pedroza under odd scoring. And we talk about real odd scoring. One judge gave it a 10-point difference for Pedroza. The other one gave it an 8. The one was the referee, Stanley Christodoulou. He gave it a 6-point difference for Pedroza. And the other one gave it to Rocky Lockridge, was the well-respected Harold Letterman. He gave it to him by 2 points. And almost all the people thought Rocky Lockridge should have been given a nod, which of course been the story of Rocky Lockridge's career. We think of some of the decisions he had, especially the one against Wilfredo Gomez in '85, where he was just robbed by Don King politics. This was not a case of the worst decision in boxing history. I mean, it wasn't even in that category. I thought the scores were a little too wide, but because that governing body had Eusebio Pedroza in their personal fantasies, that's why they gave him a bigger nod than people that he should have gotten. I can understand that Rocky Lockridge won, but I thought Eusebio Pedroza did enough in the key moments of this fight to just eke out a close decision. Actually, 15-round fights are trickier to score than 12-round fights because it's an odd number. You can eventually wind up with a draw without having scored even rounds. And that's what this fight particularly was when I watched it in review. But Pedroza, some people thought, might have got away with one here. He sort of did, but the inexperience of Rocky Lockridge showed as Pedroza had his moments where he was basically in the defensive. Lockridge didn't take advantage of it. That's where the fight was lost. Granted, the feeling is in the Lockridge camp that Rocky Lockridge, when you talk about Lockridge, he felt like he victimized by Wilfredo Gomez, which he genuinely was. He also felt like he was victimized against Julio Cesar Chavez in a somewhat of a similar fight to the first Pedroza fight. But like the Pedroza fight, Chavez was a right winner. Just the margin was just a lot wider than really what I and many people thought. I mean, I'm not gonna say they were close fights because I thought Pedroza was a right winner, but it wasn't no way was it a 10-point fight. No way. But the real story of this fight was that the accusations from Lockridge's camp, especially Luduva, when it came to accusing Eusebio Pedroza of taking a foreign substance. He went to the test, took a pre-fight drug test, came out clean, and that basically shot that down in a minute. But because of how the fight was scored, a rematch was demanded, took place 3 years later, and Pedroza got the unanimous decision a little more convincingly than this particular fight that I'm talking about right now. Eusebio Pedroza, we talk about underrated fighters. Here's one of them. I mean, he came at a time when Salvador Sanchez ruled the roost of the featherweight division. And when he came around, he basically came around and basically was an opposing figure. I never heard of a 5'9" featherweight at that time till this guy came around. A 5'9" featherweight who had a long reach, tight guard, very sturdy fighter, could give any featherweight in any era all they can handle. And he showed his full display on this particular night when he beat Rocky Lockridge. You know, granted, the circumstances were funny before, during, and after, but he did get the right decision. And of course, many thought this was going to lead to the super fight between him and Salvador Sanchez. But we know what happened with Sanchez, with the unfortunate tragedy that took his life a little more than a year and a half later. That we were deprived of that fight. You could probably say the fight should have happened before then, but there are reasons why that didn't, but nobody knows. But Eusebio Pedroza in that weight class was as good as anyone. I mean, he can hang in there with anyone in the featherweight, super featherweight divisions. I mean, he's in that conversation. We talk about some of the all-time great featherweights, like a Willie Pep, Sandy Sadler, Henry Armstrong, the aforementioned Salvador Sanchez, among many others. He's in that conversation. I mean, again, not a guy that wowed you and did one thing great. Did a lot of things good, but because he had that tremendous run of 7 years and 19 successful title defenses in 18 different parts of the globe, that should tell you just how great Eusebio Pedroza was. And he was pretty darn great for that weight class. I mean, the only thing in there he had with the middle was a wild draw with Bernard Taylor under some weird circumstances, which I'll touch on when I get to that fight. But Eusebio Pedroza in those weight classes was as good as anyone. He could fight with anyone in any era. Of course, he had the number one forte that helps you out in those sort of fights, body punching, which was one of the better ones at, and one of the more underrated ones at. And that's how he was able to pull this one out 45 years ago today in New Jersey against Rocky Lockridge. And Lockridge, of course, after this, turned out to have a solid career. Did lose an eventual rematch to Pedroza. Did win a world championship when he flattened Roger Mayweather backwards without right cross. Also managed to win another world title down the line before he lost that to Tony Lopez. Also a solid career. Not an all-time great career, but a solid one. But these two had a heck of a clash. A very technical, high-level, technically skilled clash between two featherweights at that time who were about the sweet science. And that's what Eusebio Pedroza and Rocky Lockridge delivered. And it was Pedroza who was a right winner, albeit under some weird circumstances and some crazy accusations. Eusebio Pedroza was as good as anyone. I mean, he was good at any one of those weight classes. I mean, that's how all these fantasy matchups you guys talk about. He can put him in against any of those guys. Not saying he wins them all, but he'll give you more than what you asked for because he was that damn good. And nobody talks about him enough in those weight classes because he was damn good. May God rest the souls of both fighters. Actually, one last thing before I touch on to the Olympics. Maybe Rocky Lockridge's best moment was when a YouTube video went viral in 2013 when a random internet troll just wanted to approach Rocky Lockridge, who was homeless at the time, and Lockridge delivered the perfectly timed right cross, and that moronic coward was asleep. Unfortunately, he was able to wake up. That was a misfortune when Rocky Lockridge put that coward on his butt in that YouTube video. Probably Lockridge's finest hour was that day. Internet trolls like that need knocked out for good. And Rocky Lockridge took care of that. Now we're going to fast forward a few years to the 1988 Olympics. And two fights that had two different storylines, two different odd circumstances for different reasons. And of course, they're memorable for the wrong reasons, however you want to put it. Let's start with the kingpin of them all. It was a light middleweight gold medal fight between Roy Jones Jr. and Park Si Hun. Everybody knows the story with this one. I'll just break this down simple and quick because there's nothing much to break down with this one. Roy Jones Jr. wins every minute of every round. Got the standing 8 in the second round. Could have made a case for a standing 8 in the third round because a punch that Roy Jones stunned Si Hun with was almost like the one that got him the standing 8 in round 2. But inexplicably, some way, somehow, all 5 judges scored every round for Park Si Hun. You even scored a round that Park Si Hun got a 10-8 against to standing 8 count against him. You scored that for Park Si Hun. In one of the more wild, dark cloud moments in all of boxing history, amateur or pro, some way, somehow, this guy gets a decision. Some way, somehow. I mean, he got a 10-8. You got a clear-cut 10-8 round of round 2. If a professional ranks, that's a 10-8 round for Roy Jones when Park Si Hun got the standing 8 off that left hook. You could have argued he could have had another one in round 3 because yet the same thing happened. But they gave all those rounds to Park Si Hun. Why? Here we are 37 years later asking the question, how you scored out a shutout for Park Si Hun? Because all 3 judges, 5-0 for Park Si Hun. Think about it for a minute. All 3 judges scored this fight 5-0 for Park Si Hun. That's probably the bigger travesty than the Roy Jones performance. Being snubbed out of it is how you scored it that way. The question still was ongoing for the longest time, and it's still going today. And there have been all kinds of questions. The International Olympic Committee has been fried to the ashes for 37 years to come up with real answers. And the judges who basically tucked their tails between their legs and backed out and still haven't explained why they scored it that way. And they're still wondering how you score that particular fight for Park Si Hun. I mean, a lot of people call it the worst decision all of boxing history. I call it at least in amateur boxing history because too much variables we compare amateurs and the pros. But it's not the fact that they robbed Roy Jones of a gold medal. They robbed Roy Jones of a gold medal in a performance where they basically said, doesn't matter what you do, we're not giving you rounds. This was basically premeditated from the beginning. I mean, some of it was, you could probably say, was how Roy Jones carried himself with the showboating throughout some of the fights in this, especially in the fight against Richard Woodhall, the one before this, which was mentioned by Marv Albert and Freddie Pacheco. Maybe that's why they scored it the way they did. But it still doesn't excuse it. And 37 years later, everyone's still asking, how did this happen? And how you scored it happen this way. It's not the fact they scored it for Park Si Hun. It was bad enough. I mean, that was bad enough. How do you have all 5 judges unanimously agree to not give Roy Jones a single round, especially one round where a standing 8 count was administered into the pros? That's technically a 10-8 round by default. Someone explain that. Nobody can because nobody has the courage to do it. That's what happened with this. Of course, we know the careers went totally different directions. Maybe the greatest thing to show you about what took place on this day took place apparently a couple years ago when Park Si Hun went to the home of Roy Jones Jr. when they met for the first time since that 88 Olympics. And Park Si Hun presented Roy Jones with a gold medal, which should have been rightfully his, in one of the most acts of class you're ever going to see. And a big shout out to Park Si Hun for that one. Now, let me remind everybody real quick before I close the book on this. Everyone makes Park Si Hun the reason why this happened. It didn't. It's not Park Si Hun's fault because Park Si Hun was a fighter. Park Si Hun was fighting for the gold medal. It was simply because nobody bought into Roy Jones's act. Nobody liked Roy Jones's showboatism, and because of it, that's how it happened. People think Park Si Hun was the reason why all of this happened. Park Si Hun just fought a fight. The judges were the ones that made the decision to give it to Roy Jones Jr. That's why we had what we had. So don't make Park Si Hun the cause of all of this because he was the one that fought the fight. It was the judges who scored it, not Park Si Hun. And Roy Jones, when he embraced Park Si Hun when he came to Florida to meet him in person, tells you all I needed to know. The fact they were able to, subside all of that. Park Si Hun took the high road to give Roy Jones a gold medal he deserved, and he legitimately deserved it, says a lot about the two men at the end of the day, especially Park Si Hun. And as far as this decision goes, let me remind people, we've clamored for the real reasons why this happened. Appeals were filed, but they were thrown down the garbage can for whatever reason. And even a documentary on it on one of the HBO shows prior to a Jones fight that was asked about it, a member of the international committee tucked her tail between her legs. We know what really happened. All you had to do was tell us why it happened. You didn't want to. That's what happened. And probably the darkest day in Olympic sports history, maybe Olympic boxing history. Of course, we know a lot of things changed in the Olympic boxing system when it comes to judging. It's now a point system based on solid punches, but that doesn't even work out. So what do we have at the end of the day with this? Basically nothing. But still, the worst decision in amateur boxing history took place 37 years ago in Seoul, South Korea, when Park Si Hun was basically given a shutout in a fight that he really lost. The given a shutout in a fight that he got a 10-8, really a 10-8 round, and should have gotten a second, and somehow he wins those rounds, requires an explanation 37 years later. And until someone has the balls to explain it, we're probably never going to get the answers. Crazy. But great goodwill gesture by Park Si Hun to give Roy Jones the gold medal, because anybody with a brain knows that belonged to Roy Jones. And also in that same Olympics, actually the next fight, maybe a bit of a trendsetter when you think of it moving forward. 201 pounds plus for the gold medal in the super heavyweight division. This was Lennox Lewis out of Canada and America's Riddick Bowe. Odd ways they got to this point. Excuse me. Odd ways they got to this point, but they got to this point. Of course, Riddick Bowe, the theory is he basically coasted his way through the Olympics, had to be motivated just to do something just to get to the gold medal round, because he had a fight previously where he was losing every minute of the amateur fight till he got the 3 knockdown rule and made it to the gold medal round. And Lennox Lewis, who was trying to make amends for losing to Tyrell Biggs in the 84 Olympic trials, wanted to hit his landmark to win the gold medal. A 6'6" Lennox Lewis versus a 6'5" Riddick Bowe. I'll touch on that part here in a second. Story with this one, a tactical first round, a point was taken away for Bowe, but in the second round, Lennox Lewis said, heck with it, turned on the pressure, turned it up, got the early standing A count, then the left-right combination that got the stoppage, albeit under weird circumstances, but Lennox Lewis wins a gold medal. And Riddick Bowe's taking home the silver. Maybe in hindsight, when you think of all the heavyweights after that, like the Klitschko's, Tyson Fury, just to name a few of them, Robert Helenius, Nikolai Valuev, those guys 6'5" or bigger, maybe you can point to this fight, this amateur fight between Riddick Bowe and Lennox Lewis as the one that set the tone for it. Because we didn't have guys that big doing the things these two guys did, both in the amateurs and the pros. And when Lewis won the gold medal, its greatness was on its way. And as far as Riddick Bowe goes, the bad habits caught up to him. Came in this fight real lethargic, especially in the second round where he got blitzed and the fight was over. Granted, stopped under weird circumstances, but it didn't hinder the fact that Riddick Bowe was already overwhelmed and the fight was essentially over. But when you talk about these two, a 6'5" and a 6'6" heavyweight, because we didn't have heavyweights who could do the things these two guys did at that point, maybe you could say to set a tone for bigger heavyweights of that size and taller moving forward, because that's when we introduced the guys like the Klitschko's and Tyson Fury, just to name a few of them. And of course, we know what this spun up to. They both went to the pros. A 4-man tournament in 1992 took place, where it was Lennox Lewis against Razor Ruddock, Evander Holyfield versus Riddick Bowe. Lewis and Bowe won those 2 fights. And of course, after Bowe beat Holyfield, he saw Lennox Lewis, who was doing commentary for the TVKO version of the Holyfield-Bowe fight, started to taunt Lennox Lewis after the fight. And we know that what that propelled. The Bowe trip to London, where Riddick Bowe throws a belt in the garbage can to openly duck Lennox Lewis in Lennox Lewis's backyard in one of the most despicable acts ever. What people don't understand is this. This was the gold medal round of an amateur fight. Not just any amateur fight. This is for the gold medal. And we talk about going to this point, you better be on your A games. There's a feeling across the boxing landscape that what happened on this night was primarily the reason why Riddick Bowe ducked Lennox Lewis, and basically would still be the reason why for it. There's other reasons, probably on top of it. Also, Eddie Futch thought it was a bad style matchup for Bowe, which points to what took place in the '88 Olympics. And the business aspect, which Rock Newman was just in this for the theatrics. It's the fact that not that he ducked Lennox Lewis, Riddick Bowe ducked Lennox Lewis for the corpse of a 38-year-old Michael Dokes who had no business fighting after Dokes was starched by Razor Ruddock 3 years before. That should tell you how much fear Lennox Lewis put into Riddick Bowe. And he didn't have to do anything. Actually, it was actually during the opening ceremonies of the Olympics where Lennox Lewis sought Riddick Bowe out and basically said, I'm going to knock you out. And he did it. So we fast forward to when they meet in the pros after Bowe's win over Holyfield and he taunts Lennox Lewis. Lennox Lewis said to Riddick Bowe's face again, bring it on. I'm going to knock you out. And what happens? Riddick Bowe and Rock Newman fly to London with the championship belt, throw it in the garbage can as a way to duck Lennox Lewis because Lewis was Bowe's mandatory after the four-way tournament they had at the end of '92. And that's why we never had that fight. Simply because of what took place in the gold medal round 37 years ago when Lennox Lewis just peppered Riddick Bowe, turned up the pressure, and had him stopped. And that basically lied in the head of Riddick Bowe for the longest time. We're not talking about just any amateur fights. This was for the gold medal, and it's like fighting for the heavyweight championship times 20. That's what Lewis-Bowe was. And what happened to Bowe on that night to Lennox Lewis stayed in his head for the longest time, and those around him knew it, saw it, and that's why they ducked Lennox Lewis, and that's why we never had Riddick Bowe versus Lennox Lewis, a fight that we should have had at least on 3 different occasions. I mean, I don't like to use the word duck because we know there's a business aspect to the sport of boxing, but this is the only circumstance you can legitimately say a duck took place. It was Riddick Bowe ducking Lennox Lewis. Why? Because of what happened to Riddick Bowe on this night 37 years ago in Seoul, South Korea, having it handed to him by Lennox Lewis in the amateurs. I've always said Lennox Lewis is always going to beat Riddick Bowe in the amateurs because doing this in the, Lennox Lewis is always going to beat Riddick Bowe in the professionals because he always have the psychological edge of beating Riddick Bowe in the amateurs for the gold medal and have him stand on the podium with the gold medal around his neck. That was always going to give him the psychological edge. And consider Riddick Bowe's bad habits in and out of the ring. Lennox Lewis was going to exploit it if they ever fought. That's why Riddick Bowe was never in Lennox Lewis's league. That's why after he beat Evander Holyfield, he flew to London with Rock Newman, threw the belt in the garbage can, and basically said, I ain't fighting Lennox Lewis. That's exactly what happened when all this took place. Riddick Bowe was never in Lennox Lewis's league, no matter how hard people could try to sell it. That's exactly what happened at the end of the day. Yeah, I hate to use the word duck, but in this case, it has to be used. And I conclude with something that took place Saturday night, and this needs to be called out. This was at Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati, where the Cincinnati Bearcat football team probably got their most significant win, probably since when they went to the playoff 4 years ago, when they lost to Alabama there, when they beat Iowa State. And we know what happens in this situation. Field storming. I don't really have an opinion on field storming because I understand what it entails and what it details for. But why are you field storming in a game you're supposed to win, you were expected to win, you were favored to win, and you did win? You did what you were supposed to do. What does field storming in Cincinnati do for you? That's why it's bad enough we have cowards in the Cincinnati Bengals community. Now we have cowards in the Cincinnati Bearcats community because they want to run the field storm after a win they were expected to do. Not because it was an upset, because there was no upset here. The Bearcats were favored. They did what they were supposed to do, and they did it. They got a nice win over a ranked team. Great. I mean, it was great. Don't get me wrong. It was a good win. But why are you acting like the biggest group of cowards in Cincinnati field storming after a win that you were expected to get, supposed to get, was favored to get, and eventually got? Does it get you anywhere? No. Other than the fact you guys are the biggest group of cowards in Cincinnati, that's pretty much it. I don't have an opinion on field storming. Just like I'm not. I get it. I understand it. It's going to cross controversy all over the college football landscape. It happens in college football. Also happens in college basketball. I get it. I understand it. I mean, I don't particularly co-sign on it because I'll never do it because I don't attend college games. It's one thing to do it when you're a Cinderella story and shock the world, and I get it. But why do you feel the need to carry yourselves like the biggest group of cowards in Cincinnati, doing it in a game that you were expected to win, you were favored to win, and you did what you were supposed to do? What does that say at the end of the day? And then you guys are the biggest group of cowards in Cincinnati again. Act like you've been there, because you were the favorites. Field storming a game after you were favored is the biggest act of cowardice you could do. I mean, I'm not a fan of doing it regardless, but I understand it. Because one thing to do it when you're the favorites, it's another thing to do it. Back up. It's one thing to do it as the underdogs. You know, if you were like an underdog, you shock the world. Because that happens in all the history of college football. I understand it. But to do it as the favorites, when you were favored to win, and you were expected to win, and you did what you were supposed to, it's an act of cowardice, and it's a bad look. I mean, you just ruined a great day for Cincinnati Bearcats football. You genuinely did by running onto the field in a game you were supposed to win and won. It was despicable. It was insulting. It was cowardly, and it was something that shouldn't have been done. All because you did what you were supposed to do. I understand it, but it's nothing you should have done. It makes the Bearcat fans some of the biggest group of cowards that falls in the category of Bengals fans because of how they carry themselves on that day after the game. Shame on you guys. I thought you guys were better, but you guys are just as bad as Bengals fans. All because you did what you were supposed to do. Now, if you was a 10-point underdog and you did it, I wouldn't have a much of a problem with it. That's one thing. Great. As I said, I'm not a great fan of field storming because I don't know what the criteria is. But to act like beating a team that you were supposed to beat says a lot more about you at the end of the day. You did what was expected. I mean, you beat Iowa State. No one was on the Iowa State bandwagon. But you guys at Nippert Stadium in Cincinnati felt the need to carry yourselves like cowards and run the stadium. That is just absolutely cowardly. You guys are an embarrassment right now, just as bad as Bengals fans, for a whole different reason. Smarten up, do better, be better. All because you were favored and you want to make an ass of yourself. Pardon my language. Because that's what happened at the end of the day. You guys carry yourselves like cowards, and when you ran the field, you expose yourselves as cowards at the end of the day. Just hope karma doesn't bite you moving forward. You got the. I mean, it ruined. You ruined a terrific day for Bearcat football when you did that. I mean, ruined a terrific day for Bearcat football when you stormed the field. It was just cowardly. It was insulting, and it was disgraceful. Do better next time. Because it was a great win, and Sorsby was a sensational, especially when he had the touchdown that pass that sealed it. But to storm the field like the biggest group of cowards that you are, just ruined a great day for Bearcat football. It really did. Do better next time. And that'll wrap up this edition of Sir Hunt on X. I will be back tomorrow night. If you missed this show or any other of the previous shows, you can catch them on the Apple Podcasts, the iHeartRadio, and the Spotify apps. And as always, make self-care your number one priority in all walks of life. If you take care of yourself first, all good things will come your way. If you don't take care of yourself first, nothing else matters. Focus on you, take care of you, and that's the only thing that matters. Because if you do that, good things will follow, and that's the only thing you need at this point in life. Have a good rest of the night. Take care of yourselves. God bless, and I will see you tomorrow.